Hey guys, this is Caleb with DSLR Video Shooter, and today we're talking about Sony lenses, which ones are my favorite, and how I use them. So these are Sony branded lenses. I'm not going to be talking about just lenses for Sony cameras. We'll do that maybe in another video if you guys would like that. But I thought I'd cover some lenses specifically from Sony that I really like. There's so many different Sony lenses out there. The prices are everywhere. So hopefully those will help some of you out who are looking into which lens might be your best option. The first lens I want to talk about is one of the most versatile and a great all-arounder if you're only going to pick up one lens, and that is the 18-105 f4 lens. There's really only one problem with this lens, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But it is a great zoom range. Obviously, 18-105 is awesome. It is f4, so it's a little slower, so you'll have to keep that in mind. But I love this thing because of that range. 18mm is pretty wide, and this is specifically designed for crop sensors, so it won't work on the Sony a7S kind of camera, full frame camera. And a cool party piece to this lens is the little zoom rocker on the side. So you're going to get really smooth servo zooms with variable speeds, so much better than just grabbing a normal lens and trying to zoom in and out. The other cool thing is if you use the zoom ring on the lens barrel, if you prefer that, you're still going to get that insanely smooth zoom. Another feature I love about this lens is if you activate clear image zoom, which I've talked about in a previous video, you'll be able to not only zoom optically, but it'll carry on using this zoom rocker or the barrel of the lens further on into that zoom range without losing much image quality, if any, which essentially means you're going to be able to go from 18mm all the way to 210mm on just this lens if you turn clear image zoom on in your menu system. Now, what about that one thing I don't like about it? Well, that is the minimum focus distance. So you'll find specs for every single lens when it comes to this one, and that's minimum focus distance. And what that essentially means is the minimum distance you can get to an object and still retain focus. On this lens, it's pretty far, so you're not really going to get any macro or even just close-ups of things, depending on the size of the object that you're taking pictures of or filming. So that's the only problem, but at the same time, the cost of this lens is very good and nice. So, you know, around $600 and you've got a solid lens. Constant aperture all the way through at f4, which is also awesome for videos. So that is our first lens. Great all-arounder, really awesome lens, except for that one problem we talked about. The next lens is the kit lens that you can pick up with many of these cameras, especially stuff like the a6500, a6300, and that is the 16-50mm f3.5 to 5.6. And if you're going to be buying a smaller camera like the a6500 or a6300, definitely pick up the kit. I purchased that camera without the kit lens and regretted it because it is a great affordable way to get great autofocus on these cameras because the autofocus is so good. So I wouldn't just go out and buy a bunch of manual primes. Make sure you have at least one Sony lens so you can take full advantage of the amazing autofocus on these cameras. So this one's pretty slick, really compact. When you turn the camera on, it will extend. It also has a little zoom rocker on the side and then a focus ring, which is really slick. If you turn autofocus on, the ring of the lens turns into your zoom ring. Great little lens. It might not be the sharpest in the corners and all that kind of thing, but if you just need a good autofocus lens that has a decent range, this is a great one to go for. Our next lens is the only Sony prime lens I own, and that is the 28mm f2. The reason I love this lens and went for it is, first of all, f2 is pretty fast, so you'll get some nice shallow depth of field, and it's a little wider. I really do enjoy the 28mm focal length on crop sensors. It lets you back up a little bit, get closer to what would be a 50mm on a full frame sensor. So you're getting a little bit of a wider shot, but you're still retaining some of that shallow depth of field. Now, I don't own any 50mm from Sony. A lot of you might be asking, why wouldn't you own that 51.8 or something like that? And the reason is, when it comes to that much shallow depth of field, I prefer to use a manual lens. It's much more affordable. You have a lot more control since you have so much you're going to have to deal with when it comes to focus. So I'd recommend sticking with manual prime lenses if you want a fast 50. But this 28 is great. The other thing I love about it is on a gimbal, it still gives me a little bit of wideness, if you will, kind of a medium to medium wide, but I still have that shallow depth of field. And on these cameras, specifically the A6500, A6300, you get that great autofocus, so it can handle an f2 pretty well on a gimbal system. And then last but hardly least is the Sony 10-18 zoom lens. For that tight of a range, it's kind of an expensive lens, but oh my gosh, it is so good. This is a crop sensor only, so this won't work with any full frame Sony cameras if you upgrade to those in the future. But I can't get over how awesome this lens is. So for your zoom, you have a mechanical zoom, unlike our first lens that we looked at. And it's just amazing how wide that 10mm is. The other thing I love is you can still get pretty close to your subject and retain focus. So one of my favorite things to do is hop all the way out to 10mm and get really close to my subject. And you get this incredible immersion because it feels like you're right there. You have that wide field of view and you're right up in a person or an object's business. It can be a very intimate lens depending on how you use it. And again, at 18mm, you're still getting a wide field of view, but obviously you have that nice little range between 10 and 18 to punch in and out. I did notice also that this doesn't distort a ton. You'd think at 10mm you'd be getting a lot of fisheye effect, but that really isn't the case, which is really awesome, and I do love that because I don't really care much for fisheye lenses. The other thing is, if you're saying, well, why would you buy a lens like that? It's only going to give you 8mm differences between the two focal lengths. Well, that's where clear image zoom comes in. So if you activate clear image zoom on your camera, you'll be able to go from 10mm all the way to an equivalent close to 40mm, 38mm. So that's pretty awesome to have on a little lens. Now this is an f4 lens, so getting shallow depth of field is almost completely impossible at 18, and depending on how much distance there is behind your subject, you're still going to get it, but don't expect to get anything close to a silky f2 look on a longer focal length. But that f4 is constant, and this is kind of the king of gimbals when it comes to lenses. It gives you a lot of versatility, and I really love this thing, and if you're vlogging, it's a no-brainer. So there you have it. Those are the 4 Sony lenses that I own. I really don't plan on picking any more up. These kind of cover all my bases from 10mm to, depending on how you look at the whole clear image zoom thing, 210mm, and several different options for shallow depth of field and other features. I do have a lot of manual lenses I use with my cameras, but these are the workhorses I go for when I need that epic autofocus on my Sony camera. So that's going to do it for this video. Check the description for links to these lenses and where you can pick them up, and let me know if you have any questions and what lenses you guys use for your Sony bodies. Otherwise, you can watch fresh videos here at DSLR Video Shooter every single week. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.